After the death of his detestable father, he uncovers a mysterious inheritance of 500 million yen. Opting for a life of freedom, the protagonist immersed himself in Dungeon Attack, the most challenging online game, and accomplished the remarkable feat of defeating every demon lord. Yet, upon answering an enigmatic question at the game's conclusion, he suddenly found himself transported into the game world. Reincarnated as Dantalion, the weakest and lowest-ranked demon lord, he relied solely on his memory of conquering the mightiest demon lord and his cunning wit to navigate the harsh realities of this new realm. Surrounded by deceit, treachery, and intricate plots, Dantalion emerged as a demon lord from the bottom of the barrel. Thus begins the tale of the ultimate strategist. The story commenced with the demise of the protagonist's father, a figure he harbored deep disdain for. Long had he wished for his father's death, and on that fateful day, his wish was granted as his father succumbed to a heart attack. He was a criminal, a womanizer, and a greedy piece of crap. He had been a constant source of trouble for the protagonist. However, he did do one good thing for the protagonist after dying. After finally finishing cleaning his house, the protagonist disposed of the garbage using 2 bags. Memories of his deceased father surfaced, prompting thoughts that perhaps his father knew that his death was approaching. Pouring himself a cup of coffee, he shrugged off the notion. Who cares? It's irrelevant now. Bathed in the morning sunlight filtering through the curtains, he observed the rush of workers heading to their dreaded workplaces. Standing there, savoring his coffee, he reveled in his newfound freedom, feeling relieved of all worries. Who would have thought that decrepit old man had left behind a secret fortune, hidden right there in the house? In the basement, no less. A staggering 500 million yen. Seated on the sofa, he reflected on his father's character. With this much money, he can do and buy whatever he wants. A house. A car. Even women. But he's not really interested in those kinds of things. As the doorbell rang, he hurriedly rose from his seat. Rushing to the door, he eagerly accepted the package delivered to him. With a burst of excitement, he bounded back to his bed, eager to explore its contents. Reclining in his bed, he marveled at the transformation of his bedroom. Now that he possessed ample funds, he had fashioned his dream sanctuary. The total expenditure for this endeavor amounted to 30 million yen. He made 3 solemn vows to himself: to abstain from work, to not have friends, and to remain unmarried. For him, the notion of labor was abhorrent. He viewed it as the epitome of misery. Similarly, the prospect of maintaining friendships held little appeal. He perceived social interactions as incessant competitions, revolving around job achievements and dining out, concepts he found profoundly vexing. And then there's marriage, vowing to spend the rest of your life with someone you love. Reflecting on his father's numerous failed marriages, no less than 12 times, filled him with disgust and disdain. Determined not to replicate his father's mistakes, he opted to remain single. Instead, he found solace in indulging in leisurely pursuits, such as playing games on his comfortable futon. To him, this simple pleasure epitomized luxury, even paradise. With a determined proclamation, he embarked on a quest to conquer the backlog of games that cluttered his virtual library, vowing to achieve 100% completion in each. 2 months elapsed in a haze of relentless gaming, during which time his physical appearance deteriorated, evidenced by the unruly stubble adorning his face. Within the confines of his once pristine sanctuary, now engulfed in neglect, the stench of stagnation permeated the air, punctuated by the sight of scattered garbage bags strewn across the floor. Oblivious to the chaos that surrounded him, he reveled in the euphoria of victory as he finally triumphed over Dungeon Attack, a digital conquest that took some time. Contemplating his next gaming venture, he pondered the possibility of trying out a VR game. A notification chimed, drawing his attention to the computer screen. Displayed was a message reading, "You have one new message." Puzzled, he wondered how he could receive a message without accepting any friend requests. The message read, "Thank you for completing Dungeon Attack. We, the creators, are very happy that you played it until the end." Recognizing it as a communication from the management, he surmised that they must have dedicated countless hours to the game's development. It dawned on him that games are indeed crafted by ordinary office workers. Acknowledging the business aspect of gaming, he understood the intention behind flattering users to promote further purchases. Despite this, he couldn't help but appreciate the effort the creators had put into their work. Following the previous message, another notification appeared, this time prompting him to participate in a survey. Perplexed, he wondered about the unexpected request for feedback. The first question presented him with a choice between, I prefer cute girls and, I prefer mature girls. Perplexed by the nature of the question, he pondered its significance. Ultimately, he decided to simply select one of the options, dismissing the query as inconsequential. The subsequent question required him to choose between, I get excited when people hit me, and I get excited when I hit people. Finding the question rather bizarre, he raised an eyebrow at its peculiar nature. Numerous peculiar choices followed, such as, the lower the difficulty, the better. Versus, the higher the difficulty, the better. And, I solve problems using brute force, versus, I solve problems using intelligence. Additionally, he was presented with options like, I keep the secrets of others. Versus, I take advantage of the secrets of others, and, friendship means working together towards the same goal, versus, friendship means people who will not betray you. Feeling increasingly unsettled by the intrusive nature of the survey, he couldn't help but find it downright creepy. Exasperated, he silently urged for the questions to cease. The next survey presented a straightforward question. Do you know how this world ends? Yes or no? With a hint of annoyance, he scoffed at the obviousness of the query, considering he had already completed the game. As the survey progressed, the next question emerged. Would you be able to change that ending? Yes or no? This inquiry sparked a surge of unease within him. Doubt crept in, and he began to wonder if the survey was genuine or a deceptive ploy. The thought of falling victim to a scam sent a shiver down his spine, amplifying his frustration. With growing apprehension, he abruptly released the console he had been clutching, deciding to halt his participation in the survey altogether. In a world where trust seemed scarce, he felt a sense of relief for not succumbing to the survey's potential deception. Suddenly, his attention was diverted by the sight of a cockroach crawling across his desk, eliciting a grimace of disgust on his face. Reacting in panic, he swiftly rose from his seat. In the rush, his hand inadvertently pressed a button on the console he had tossed aside earlier. Coincidentally, the button selected yes, in response to the survey question about altering the game's ending. A sudden burst of bright light emanated from his computer, temporarily blinding him. He shielded his eyes with his arm. Once the light subsided, he found himself no longer in his familiar room. All that remained were the piles of garbage and the now shut-off computer. Confusion enveloped him as he tried to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Examining his hands, he was startled to find them unfamiliar. A wave of pain washed over him, causing him to collapse to the ground, bewildered by the sensation in his stomach. Approaching the protagonist, a man emerged, holding a weapon in his grasp. He urged the protagonist to hurry up and tell them where the treasure is. He threatened that if he doesn't, they'll get more serious and hurt him even more. They referred to him as Demon Lord. Confusion washed over him as he contemplated the situation. Was the mention of treasure and the title of Demon Lord directed at him? And where exactly was he? As he observed his surroundings, it dawned on him that he was situated within a cave. The dim illumination revealed broken pillars scattered throughout the cavern, with a menacing gargoyle statue positioned atop one. Across from him stood a group of armed adventurers, their intent ominous. Confusion clouded the protagonist's mind. Memories of playing a game at home surfaced, but they were hazy and incomplete. Pushing aside the uncertainty, he has to do something about the current situation, but his whole body is in pain for a while now. Examining his injured leg, there's no way he can run. He's in so much pain that he's losing his mind. However, he fought to maintain composure, urging himself to remain calm and think rationally. He knew he needed to strategize and get some clues by talking to the adventurers. He voiced his confusion, questioning the group why they keep calling him Demon Lord. In response, the leader seized his horn, causing him to experience further agony. Leaning closer, the leader asked if he had finally lost his mind up there after all the beatings. He said that his horns identified him as the Demon Lord, Dantalion. As realization dawned upon him, the protagonist's memories of the game Dungeon Attack flooded his mind. An RPG where the heroes go on a journey to defeat the Demon Lords. A fantasy game, where you have to save the world by fighting against numerous demon lords. It's an insanely difficult game where you die again and again. Its story is so depressing where the one sole ending is the collapse of the world. And as for Dantalion, he is the trash of the 72 demon lords, ranked 71st in the rankings. He's the weakest enemy and the first one to be defeated by the heroes. He realized he had been playing dungeon attack. The current predicament undoubtedly confirmed it. He was now in the world of dungeon attack as the weakest of the demon lords, Dantalion. The revelation left him incredulous, yet it explained everything. However, he soon recognized the gravity of the situation, realizing that if his assumption was correct, then things were dire. The leader seized his horn and flung him several meters away, causing him to cough violently. Fearing for his life, he realized the gravity of the situation. The leader then issued orders to the other members, who responded eagerly. They proceeded to mercilessly assault Dantalion, launching punches and kicks from all directions. Surrounding him, they stomped on him relentlessly, reducing him to a battered and bruised state. Dantalion lamented his situation, reflecting on the irony of finding himself on the brink of death despite finally escaping the curse of his father. He had hoped for a comfortable life, free from such turmoil, yet now faced imminent peril. Despite his struggles, he found himself overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught, his consciousness slipping away amidst the agony of his tormentor's assault. As his consciousness waned, he began to hallucinate. Before him, he saw his father seated at a table, wearing a smirk. Dantalion couldn't help but question why he was laughing. He blamed him for the suffering he had endured. He has suffered so much because of him. Suddenly, a memory resurfaced. A similar incident from the past when he had been abducted by someone seeking revenge against his detestable father. On the fourth occasion this transpired, the kidnapper drove the car while the protagonist, bound by rope, sat in the backseat. The kidnapper watched him closely, noting his unusually calm demeanor. He finally reached his limit. This time, he just let it happen and stayed calm. Arriving at an abandoned warehouse, he found himself bound to a chair. The kidnapper, pointing a gun at him, emphasized that the firearm was not a toy and warned him that any attempt to escape would result in his death. He replied that he understood, and urged the kidnapper to go ahead and shoot. And so, he made a bet with himself. A bet to see if he could free himself from his detestable father. If the gun is real, it's his win. If it's fake, it's his loss. Then, he'll be at the mercy of his father forever. The kidnapper was taken aback, and asked him if he was serious. Ignoring the warning, the protagonist grabbed the kidnapper's hand that held the gun and directed it towards his own forehead, challenging the kidnapper to go ahead. The kidnapper dropped the gun and stepped back, his knees buckling as he sank to the ground, shaking with fear and shock evident in his expression. Ultimately, the kidnapper surrendered himself, and the protagonist lost the bet. However, this experience led him to a realization. The one who survives in the end is the one with stronger resolve. It had slipped off his mind, he had already died once that day. Then, he can shape this whole situation into any way he wants. The leader issued a final warning, approaching him and demanding to know the location of the treasure. In a brutal display of dominance, the leader stomped his foot onto his head. Receiving no response from him, the leader showed impatience, remarking that Dantalion seemed intent on taking the treasure to hell. With a snap of his fingers, one of his subordinates, a bald, muscular man wielding a large hammer, questioned whether they should proceed to kill Dantalion before discovering the whereabouts of the treasure. The leader dismissed the issue of the treasure, confident they would retrieve it later, and instructed the bald man to kill him. Raising his large hammer, the bald man declared a final warning, indicating that Dantalion would come to regret his actions in the afterlife. Just as the man was about to strike, Dantalion raised his hands in surrender and uttered, "All right." The man halted his attack at the last moment. Determined, Dantalion resolved that he'll do it. No matter what it takes, he will survive. Despite the pain coursing through his body, he managed to rise from the ground, trembling. He announced his intention to disclose the location of the treasure to them. The leader chuckled triumphantly that Dantalion had finally given up. He also pondered that if they go get the treasure quickly and then present Dantalion's head to the boss, they'll be singing praises for them. Dantalion considered the situation. The only problem is that he doesn't know if there even is any treasure to begin with. However, he understood that if he misled them by indicating a random direction, they would not hesitate to kill him. His immediate priority was to navigate through the situation and buy himself some additional time. Dantalion knelt before them and admitted defeat. He disclosed that the treasure lay within the Demon Lord's chamber. However, he explained that the treasure was concealed with magic, and the only one who can undo that magic is him. The leader issued a warning by thrusting his sword into the ground in front of Dantalion. He cautioned that if Dantalion is lying, he'll kill him on the spot. Dantalion met his gaze with a steely resolve and said that he understood. The leader turned to his subordinates, conveying the location of the treasure, the Demon Lord's chamber. With a resolute command, he spurred them onward, igniting their spirits. The cave reverberated with the cheers of the adventurers, their excitement palpable in the air. Commencing their trek towards the Demon Lord chamber, Dantalion led the way, guiding them through the cave. Along the path, they encountered more shattered pillars and the skeletal remnants of both adventurers and monsters. Dantalion reflected on his recent accomplishment, acknowledging that he had successfully navigated the initial hurdle. However, he recognized that the true challenge lay ahead. While he was temporarily safe from immediate harm, he understood that his situation would become precarious once they reached the Demon Lord's chamber. With this realization, he resolved to devise a new plan promptly. The leader glanced over his shoulder and urged Dantalion to pick up his pace with a stern command. Dantalion complied, apologizing for his slow progress. The leader questioned his sincerity, if he's just stalling for time. He warned against any attempts to delay. As Dantalion pressed forward, he mulled over his precarious predicament. If things go on like this, he's definitely gonna get killed sooner or later. Somehow, before they kill him, he has to kill them. But what should he do? There's 10 of them and they're all armed. He wondered if there's anything he can use. Then he remembered that this is Dantalion's castle. He looked around to see if there were signs of any monsters left. His thoughts were interrupted when the leader turned back to him once more, urging him to hurry up and get on his feet, signaling to continue moving. In his mind, the leader had already decided they would dispose of him once they obtained the treasure. Dantalion noticed that they had been encountering monster remains along the way, but none of them seemed fresh. This realization made it clear to him that he couldn't depend on anyone else. He understood that he had to take matters into his own hands. Dantalion pondered how much longer it would take to reach the Demon Lord's chamber. Frustration boiled within him as he wished for the situation to be akin to a game. Suddenly, a realization struck him: the eyes of Zeus. Understanding that this was indeed a game world, he believed he should be able to utilize that ability. As Dantalion activated Eyes of Zeus, a panel only he can see materialized in front of him. It showed information about the grim reality of Dantalion's castle, a lowly F-rank cave-type dungeon, devoid of any assets, troops, or residents. Additionally, it presented a map of the entire dungeon. Dantalion smiled as he looked at the panel. Game skills. Eyes of Zeus is one of the skills in Dungeon Attack. As the name suggests, it allows you to see your current location, enemy positions, items, and traps within the dungeon. It's a high-level skill, normally only available starting from the middle of the game. However, there's an exception: the first tutorial dungeon, Dantalion's Castle, where it can be utilized early on by adventurers to familiarize themselves with the game mechanics. Until now, he'd been wondering why he became Dantalion, but he didn't expect it to end up being useful in this way. He looked at the information presented in the panel. As he thought, there are 0 troops. A message suddenly appeared in the panel: the current number of troops in the Demon Lord's castle is 0. This is extremely dangerous. Please hire troops immediately. Dantalion was taken aback by what he saw. The panel displayed the contract of Hades, which allowed him to recruit monsters for a fee. The first available monster was a slime, possessing F strength, F attack, E defense, and costing 4 libra each. Following that was a lesser fairy, boasting F strength, E attack, F defense, and priced at 8 libra each. Then came a goblin soldier with E strength, E attack, F defense, and a cost of 12 libra each. Lastly, there was a lesser golem, exhibiting D strength, D attack, C defense, and demanding 20 libra each. Glancing at his balance at the bottom, he noted that he only had 100 libra. He wondered what the previous Dantalian was doing, that he barely had any money. Dantalian's thoughts whirled as he weighed his options, each possibility fraught with uncertainty. There were 10 adventurers, and he can only hire 8 goblins. It'll be hard to beat them. He thought of getting a golem and launching a surprise attack, but he dismissed the idea. There's no guarantee he'd win. Frustration mounted as they neared the chamber. As Dantalian scrutinized the panel before him, a plan began to take shape in his mind. His chance of success would probably be about 60%. It's too low for him to risk his life, but there's no time to think. He had no choice but to do it. For this plan to succeed, he first has to gain the adventurer's trust. Before that, there's something he needed to know. Understanding the nature of the world as a game, he activated another skill, Apostle of Aphrodite. It is a skill that allows you to see the details of other players' statuses, which are normally hidden, a potent ability that grants him insight into the inner workings of his adversaries' minds. Through the veil of their status windows, Dantalian gleaned vital information about the adventurers, their names, races, levels, occupations, and a myriad of other statistics. Yet, it was their current psyche that proved most valuable. It's like mind reading, where he can read their current thoughts. Empowered by Apostle of Aphrodite, he gained access to the information he sought. Now, he needs to strategize his next move. Based on the information, he has to figure out where to go and which card to play. The leader noticed him slowing down again. He pointed his sword at him, his impatient voice pierced the air, urging him to walk faster. Dantalian responded with a quick apology and complied, determined to navigate the situation strategically. He looked at his status window and saw that his name is Leaf. He's a level 13 F-rank adventurer and his likability towards Dantalian is 0. His current psyche says, so irritating. If I could get my hands on the treasure without him, I'd kill him right now. As he anticipated, the key to his plan is to somehow make the leader trust him. Even if that means taking some risks, he is determined to take them down. As they walked through the cave, they passed more pillars. His mind was racing, thinking of a plan on how to gain the adventurer's trust. Amidst the surroundings, a skeleton caught his attention, an arrow lodged in its skull. At that moment, a plan formed in Dantalian's mind. He called out to the adventurers, halting their progress abruptly. The adventurers looked back at him, confused. Startled, Leaf demanded an explanation. He asked what's the meaning of this. Dantalian pointed ahead and explained that there was a trap lying in wait along the passage. Leaf expressed surprise, questioning the presence of a trap. Dantalian confirmed the danger, explaining that if they go any further, dozens of invisible arrows will come flying right at them. None of them would be able to get through unscathed. He proposed to advance alone to disarm the trap before the others proceeded. Dantalian moved forward. Leaf exclaimed what he was doing all of a sudden. One of the subordinates, examining the map, alerted the boss that the path ahead narrows significantly. Another pointed out the darkness ahead, making it difficult to see. As Dantalian pressed forward, Leaf warned him not to attempt an escape. Dantalian reassured Leaf that there was no need for concern. With his injured legs, fleeing was impossible. He added that it's his way of showing his respect. They're different from the previous adventurers. They didn't try to kill him right away. He said that if they don't believe him, then they can just follow right behind him. However, he won't be able to guarantee their safety. The adventurers were taken aback by Dantalian's bold move. Leaf rallied them, urging them not to be afraid and to pursue Dantalian. However, one of the subordinates interjected, suggesting they take a moment to reconsider their actions. Another echoed the sentiment, recalling the close call they had with traps at the entrance. If they had made even one mistake at the trap at the entrance, they would have been crushed to death. Frustrated, Leaf expressed his annoyance, questioning if they were even real men. As the adventurers deliberated among themselves, Dantalian pressed forward, a sly grin on his lips. He glanced back to check if the distance was far enough. He took out the arrows he had collected earlier from the corpses. He silently prayed for his plan to work. He steeled himself for what he was about to do. Gritting his teeth, he pierced his own legs with the arrows, his screams echoing off the cave walls. The adventurers heard the scream echoing through the cave. One of the subordinates speculated whether it was Demon Lord Dantalian. Leaf called out to Dantalian, demanding an explanation. Dantalian signaled them to wait, indicating that the danger from the arrows was not yet over. The subordinates sought guidance from their leader, inquiring about their course of action. He responded with frustration, insisting that they brace themselves for the situation. He cautioned that if they showed fear, he would not hesitate to end them then and there. Despite their apprehension, the others complied with their leader's directive and moved forward. Leaf's voice echoed through the cave, calling out for Dantalian. They noticed blood on the ground, a whole trail of it. The group followed the trail of blood and discovered Dantalian lying on the ground with an arrow piercing his leg. Leaf inquired about Dantalian's condition, asking what had happened. Dantalian, still recovering from his ordeal, struggled to rise to his feet, his movements labored and pained. Dantalian acknowledged his state, and said that he must have been unconscious. Leaf pressed for an explanation regarding the trap, seeking clarification on the situation. Assuring them, Dantalian confirmed that all traps had been dealt with. The adventurers exchanged glances, pondering the unexpected assistance. Leaf, with a mix of surprise and suspicion, questioned Dantalian's motives, suggesting it would have been wiser for him to remain silent about the trap. Placing his hand over his chest, Dantalian expressed his gratitude, acknowledging the difference between them and the previous adventurers. He noted their decision not to immediately end his life, which touched him deeply. That's all there is to it. As Dantalian removed the arrow from his leg with a grimace, the adventurers watched in stunned silence, their perceptions of the demon lord shifting before their eyes. He assured them that despite the injury, he was still able to proceed. With determination, he urged them to continue their journey forward. Leaf was surprised by Dantalian's actions. Meanwhile, a system message, visible only to Dantalian, appeared, indicating an increase in Leaf's likability towards him by 5 points. Observing this, Dantalian acknowledged the rise in likability with satisfaction. His plan was a success. As more notifications followed, indicating increased likability from the other adventurers, Dantalian realized that while it was a positive development, it wasn't enough. He understood that he needed to further raise their likability towards him. A system notification chimed, saying that his charm rank has increased. As he looked at his status window, his charm was now at C. Struggling to rise, Dantalian expressed his determination to proceed. Concerned about Dantalian's leg wound, Leaf said that with the wound in Dantalian's leg, he'll just slow everyone down. Leaf thought that he might be able to use him if he did this right. Commanding his subordinates, he directed someone to aid Dantalian by supporting him with a shoulder. One of them promptly stepped forward, offering his support as Dantalian leaned on him to walk. Surprised, Dantalian expressed his gratitude. Leaf, noting Dantalian's reaction, chuckled and highlighted that their actions were a token of appreciation for Dantalian's earlier assistance. Encouraging the group, Leaf rallied them to maintain their enthusiasm and press onward with determination. With a smirk, Dantalian pondered the situation. Things are going well, but their boss. He's a tough nut to crack. His likability is still not enough. Dantalian thought of another plan to increase their likability further. Having reached their destination, Leaf announced their arrival at the entrance to the Demon Lord's castle. He marveled at its grandeur, expressing that it exceeded his expectations. They observed a large door adorned with a skull at the top center. Below it, 3 circles were linked together, forming a triangle. Leaf wasted no time in swinging open the massive doors that guarded the entrance to the Demon Lord's castle. A sense of triumph surged through the group as they gazed upon the imposing structure before them. Eager to seize the treasure that lay within, Leaf turned to Dantalian, his voice brimming with anticipation. However, Leaf was taken aback to find Dantalian in tears, his face streaked with streams of emotion. It was a sight that caught them all off guard. The man supporting Dantalian in walking expressed concern, asking him what was wrong and why he was crying. Dantalian covered his eyes with his right hand. He apologized for the sudden outburst, explaining that upon arriving at the castle, it reminded him of his former comrades, whom he considered to be his family. Leaf expressed surprise, questioning whether demon lords also have families. Dantalian walked forward, extending his hand as if reaching out to reminisce about the past and his lost comrades. He confirmed that indeed, even someone like him, had those he considered family in the past. Dantalian recounted a fabricated tale of loss and sacrifice. He described a day when a group of armored assailants besieged the castle, flames engulfing everything, bodies consumed by fire. Dantalian fled for his life, pursued relentlessly. In the castle corridor, they cornered him, arrows aimed at him. As the arrows flew, one of his loyal subordinates leapt in front, taking the brunt of the attack meant for Dantalian. Despite being struck, the orc's first concern was Dantalian's safety. Tearfully, Dantalian recounted how the orc urged him to flee, sacrificing himself to protect his lord. Refusing to abandon his comrade, Dantalian insisted they escape together, but the orc, pierced by more arrows, insisted he flee alone. Reluctantly, Dantalian obeyed, leaving behind his fallen comrades who had sacrificed themselves to save him. As the adventurers listened, sympathy blossomed within them, their perceptions of Dantalian shifting in the wake of his poignant confession. In that moment, he ceased to be the feared demon lord, replaced instead by a figure of tragedy and remorse. Jack, who had been supporting Dantalian, pondered that they had expected a demon lord to be far more malevolent. However, witnessing Dantalian's grief over his fallen comrade, their perception of him shifted. Dantalian doesn't appear as evil as they imagined. As the notifications continued to chime in his mind, Dantalian couldn't help but smile inwardly, his strategy proving successful beyond his wildest expectations. Leaf grappled with the dissonance between the tales he'd heard of demon lords and the reality unfolding before him. Memories of the woman who had instigated their raid on Dantalian's castle flashed through his mind, her words painting a picture of malevolence and ruthlessness. Yet, here stood Dantalian, displaying qualities that contradicted those descriptions. Despite his reservations, Leaf's attention shifted to the utility Dantalian could offer. It doesn't matter. What's important is whether he's useful to him or not. Another notification sounded, indicating an increase in Leaf's likability towards Dantalian. Meanwhile, Dantalian expressed his gratitude to everyone, acknowledging their role in bringing him back to the castle. He noted the stark difference between them and those who had killed his family, suggesting that perhaps the deceased could find forgiveness in them. With a sense of finality, he declared that the treasures of the Demon Lord Castle and his life were now theirs. As Dantalian led them to the chamber purportedly housing the Demon Lord's treasure, anticipation bubbled among the adventurers. He declared that as promised, he will grant them the treasure of the Demon Lord's castle. Leaf asked where the treasure was. He replied that as he said earlier, the treasure is currently concealed by magic. He instructed the adventurers to stand back as he prepared to undo the magic. Leaf instructed his subordinates to retreat towards the entrance of the chamber. He asked if it's far enough. Dantalian confirmed that it's enough distance. He turned around and walked further in with a sly smirk on his face. Everything is going well. Just a little bit more, and his plan will be successful. Now, it's time for the finishing touches. After looking at his status window, he understood that there's no treasure in the castle to begin with. The only thing left is what was left by the previous Dantalian before he reincarnated, a mere 100 libra. However, as long as it's enough to fool the adventurers, it's perfect. As in the world of Dungeon Attack, 1 libra is about 15 silver coins. A system message popped out. Are you sure you want to discard 76 libra? Yes or no? The game is set up in such a way that the items and money you discard appear where you leave them. He'll take advantage of this fact. He'll do it in a bit, at a perfect time. Turning to address the assembled adventurers, Dantalian lifted one hand while placing the other over his chest. With a firm declaration, he announced himself as the 71st ranked demon lord reigning over the land. Referring to the adventurers as brave heroes, he pledged to bestow upon them all the treasures in his possession, in the name of Demon Lord Dantalian. Filled with anticipation, the adventurers eagerly awaited the appearance of the treasure. Dantalian discarded 76 libra from his account, which promptly converted into silver coins. The coins cascaded down onto the floor, eliciting excitement from the adventurers at the sight of the falling wealth. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to joyous laughter as they realized the fortune that lay before them. Leaf, in particular, laughed heartily as he gazed upon the coins, his appreciation for Dantalian growing with each passing moment. A notification sounded in Dantalian's mind, signaling an increase in Leaf's likability towards him by 50 points. Leaf commanded the adventurers to divide the treasure equally among themselves and urged them to gather it quickly. The adventurers picked up the scattered coins on the ground. Leaf contemplated that they could exploit the demon lord further, deeming it wasteful to get rid of him at this point. Before the division of the treasures could commence, Dantalion interjected, seeking their attention. Leaf inquired about the interruption, questioning if Dantalion had more to offer. He mentioned that everyone was still in the process of gathering the coins, implying that Dantalion should wait momentarily. Meanwhile, multiple notifications indicated that the other adventurers' likability towards him had increased once again. Dantalion apologized for the inconvenience but insisted there was something urgent he needed to address. He revealed that around 30 new adventurers had entered the dungeon. The adventurers were stunned by the news. Dantalion continued his deception, explaining that he used magic to be alerted of any newcomers, but he hadn't anticipated a situation like this. The adventurers reacted with panic. Leaf contemplated Dantalion's words. 30 people? That was far too many for them to handle. Leaf inquired if there was an alternative exit from the castle. Dantalion clarified that the only way out was the way they had entered. The adventurers began to panic, voicing concerns about potential attacks. One of them speculated that they would tear the place apart in less than a minute, given that there's 30 of them. Amidst the growing tension, someone exclaimed, "What are we going to do?" Observing his subordinates' fearful reactions, Leaf remained composed as Dantalion approached him with a proposal. He suggested confronting the incoming adventurers if avoiding them was not an option. Curious, Leaf inquired about his plan. Dantalion then asked if Leaf had a map, to which Leaf responded affirmatively. Dantalion explained that although his abilities couldn't predict the intruder's path, he could serve as a distraction. Leaf questioned if he meant to act as a decoy, to which he affirmed. Considering the number of individuals present, they likely formed a military division, implying they might also possess magical abilities. They would likely detect his magical energy and pursue him. With 3 possible routes to the exit, he instructed Leaf to take a separate path from him and make a direct run for the outside. Leaf pondered over his plan, astonished at the notion of him being willing to sacrifice himself once more. Then, a realization dawned on him. He questioned whether Dantalion intended to flee and speculated that he might just be bluffing about the intruders. Dantalion vehemently denied and expressed that he would never do such a thing. He emphasized that he genuinely wanted to help them. However, there was no time for him to persuade Leaf to believe him. He approached Leaf and suggested assigning some men to keep an eye on him to verify whether he would attempt to escape or not. He advised Leaf to fabricate reasons to keep all the treasure for himself. This way, Leaf would have the upper hand. If Dantalion's claim about the intruders was true, some of the adventurers might be sacrificed along with him, resulting in an increase in Leaf's share of the treasure. And even if he was deceiving them, there would be no escape for him either way, making it a win-win for Leaf. Stunned at first, Leaf soon found himself smiling at the prospect of increasing his share of the treasure through Dantalion's plan. Fueled by greed, he agreed to the strategy. However, he requested Dantalion not to disclose the decoy plan to the others, fearing it might upset them. Leaf turned to his subordinates and instructed them to cease their commotion and hasten their collection of treasures before regrouping. Dantalion silently thanked Leaf. Initially, he doubted whether Leaf would be persuaded, but now his plan had succeeded. Dantalion walked alongside 5 other adventurers, positioned at the center with the others surrounding him. One of them supported him as he walked. The adventurer holding a torch remarked on their leader's bold decision. Dantalion reminisced about the events following Leaf's acceptance of his plan. Once they had collected all the coins, they found themselves with 3 bags full. Leaf gathered the adventurers and outlined the plan. They would split into 2 groups and make their way to the exit. The adventurers reacted with shock to his decision, questioning its seriousness. An adventurer added that the leader was indeed not making any sense. Leaf silenced the murmurs and presented the map, urging them to pay attention. He pointed out the 3 routes leading to the exit, speculating that the invaders would likely choose one path. With 30 men, they likely formed a small army, far outnumbering their own group. At their current level, they were no match for them. In such a scenario, their chances of survival were slim. Leaf proposed taking a gamble on survival. The adventurers were taken aback by his suggestion. However, Leaf reassured them with a smile, stating that at least one group would have a 100% chance of survival, and with luck, no casualties would occur. Leaf made an announcement that he would retain possession of all the treasure for the time being, which evoked various reactions from the group. Despite some skepticism, Leaf reassured them that he wasn't keeping the treasure for himself. He clarified that one group would accompany the Demon Lord and they should see it as an opportunity. If the group with Dantalion survived, they would receive the reward for capturing him and become instant heroes. With a bag of coins slung over his shoulder, Leaf emphasized the risk his own group faced. Despite their doubts, he urged them to demonstrate courage and think about their families in the village. He expressed his desire for most, if not all of them, to survive. The group responded with cheers to his encouragement. As Leaf and his group proceeded with the treasures, their steps echoing through the cavern, he couldn't help but smirk at the success of his deception. He marveled at how easily he had manipulated the other adventurers into believing his words, relishing the thought of claiming all the riches for himself. On the opposite side of the chamber, Dantalion maintained his composure, executing his plan with precision. He consulted the map to ensure the positions of the two groups. With contract with Hades, he can hire monsters. He had used 76 Libra to convert into silver coins. He only had 24 Libra left. He bought a golem worth 20 Libra to bolster his scheme. Determined to eliminate every intruder, he pledged to do so without hesitation. Suddenly, the ground began to convulse violently, inciting panic among the group as they struggled to comprehend the sudden disturbance. Observing the tremors, one adventurer speculated whether it signaled an attack by invaders. Dantalion feigned shock, blending in with the startled crowd. Another member noted the ominous glow emanating from the ground. As the ground took on a purple hue, a summoning circle materialized, accompanied by a powerful gust of wind that extinguished their torches. Suddenly, it became dark and the only light was from the summoning circle. Due to his injured leg, Dantalion remained toward the rear of the group, supported by the individual assisting him in walking. Taking advantage of the darkness, he acted swiftly to eliminate his first target. The adventurer who had been assisting him to walk inquired about the situation, prompting Dantalion to silence him with a firm grip over his mouth. Dantalion warned him against making noise to avoid further suffering. Despite his shock, the adventurer found himself unable to resist. With his teammates' attention fixed on the summoning circle ahead and darkness shrouding them due to the extinguished torch, Dantalion drew a sword and expressed gratitude before swiftly dispatching the adventurer. The lifeless body fell to the ground unnoticed by the others, who remained fixated on the summoning circle before them. As the summoning circle crackled with dark energy, the colossal form of the golem emerged, towering over the adventurers with an intimidating presence. Their initial confusion quickly turned to horror as the golem unleashed its devastating strength upon them. With a thunderous blow, the golem crushed one unfortunate adventurer beneath its massive fist, leaving only a lifeless heap in its wake. Another was ensnared in its iron grip, his cries of agony drowned out by the sound of bones snapping under the immense pressure. A brave soul attempted to halt the golem's rampage, brandishing his sword with valor. But his efforts proved futile against the golem's impenetrable exterior, his weapon shattering upon impact. With a swift retaliation, the golem struck him down, leaving him sprawled upon the ground. Amidst the chaos and panic gripping the dwindling group, Dantalion capitalized on the moment to dispatch the last remaining adventurer. With calculated resolve, he approached from behind, extinguishing any chance of escape with a fatal thrust of his blade. As the adventurer gasped in disbelief, questioning his motives, Dantalion merely smirked in response, stating the obvious truth: he was a demon lord. On the opposite end of the dungeon, Leaf's group also experienced the tremors shaking the ground. They questioned the source of the sudden earthquake. Leaf speculated whether a battle had commenced with the intruders. Reflecting on the situation, he realized that the demon lord's warning had been genuine. A smirk crossed his face as he acknowledged that the demon lord had really done a good job. However, their steps halted when they saw Dantalion in front of them. Shock registered on all their faces as they beheld him. Dantalion looked at them with a fiery gaze. Leaf, taken aback, questioned Dantalion's presence and attempted to dismiss the situation with a nervous laugh, suggesting that the other group must have not encountered any intruders. Before he could inquire about the whereabouts of the others, Dantalion interjected, brandishing his bloodied sword. He declared that Leaf's companions who had accompanied him had all met their demise. Leaf struggled to comprehend the horrifying revelation. Disbelief colored his response as he accused Dantalion of jesting and urged him to stop fooling around. Dantalion placed one of his fingers against the tip of his bloodied sword, the crimson fluid still flowing from his previous kill. He remarked to Leaf that he should have already realized the truth, or perhaps he was simply unwilling to accept it. With a sinister grin, he confirmed Leaf's suspicions, admitting to being the one who had slain their comrades. Leaf, overcome with disbelief, demanded that Dantalion repeat his confession. Dantalion chuckled, mocking the adventurers' naivety and recounting the expressions on their faces as they met their demise. Leaf's anger surged, evident in the bulging veins on his face. He finally comprehended that they had been manipulated from the start, mere pawns in Dantalion's game. A series of notifications appeared, indicating that the adventurers' likability had plummeted to zero. Dantalion sought to further anger them, hurling insults and expressing mock gratitude for their foolishness. He laughed out loud and asked if they really thought that he, the Demon Lord, would actually take their side. He laughed even more. In his mind, he relished their growing anger, urging them to become even angrier. Enraged, Leaf bellowed Dantalion's name, commanding his fellow adventurers to attack. They surged forward with weapons drawn, but their advance was halted by a menacing red glow in the darkness. As they drew closer, they realized it emanated from the eyes of a looming golem. Before they could react, the golem's massive fist descended, shattering the ground beneath it and engulfing them in chaos. Amidst the turmoil, one adventurer glimpsed the horrifying sight of a companion's hand protruding from the rubble, the rest of his body buried beneath. Caught in the golem's grasp, another adventurer was mercilessly slammed into the cave wall, leaving a trail of blood trickling down its surface. With a swift turn, the golem refocused its attention on the remaining adventurers, launching another assault. Despite one man's attempt to defend himself with a raised sword, his efforts proved futile against the golem's immense strength. His agonized scream reverberated through the cavern as the golem's onslaught continued unabated. Leaf could only bear witness as the golem's fist descended once more, crushing yet another of his comrades beneath its relentless force, blood splattering across the cavern floor. The bald adventurer, wielding a hefty hammer, stealthily approached the golem from behind. With a mighty swing, he brought the hammer crashing down upon the golem, shattering it into pieces that scattered across the ground. As the dust settled, the bald man turned to his leader, eagerly anticipating praise for his deed. However, before any words of commendation could be spoken, Leaf's expression turned to one of horror as he caught sight of Dantalion emerging behind the bald man. Without hesitation, Dantalion plunged his sword into the bald man's back, swiftly ending his life. With a sigh, Dantalion credited Leaf for the opportunity, expressing his genuine gratitude. Leaf could only express disbelief at the turn of events. He saw the shattered pieces of the golem gathered and formed beside Dantalion. Dantalion explained that you can easily kill a golem by destroying the core in its chest. As long as you have the needed knowledge and experience, even the average adventurer would be able to defeat it rather easily. In other words, if Leaf had stayed calm and worked together without falling for dumb provocations, they would have been able to win. Now that the power dynamics had changed, he asked Leaf what he would do. Leaf perspired profusely, realizing the stark contrast in Dantalion's demeanor from before. Observing his menacing smirk, Leaf acknowledged that this was the true nature of the Demon Lord. The facade they witnessed earlier paled in comparison. Despite the grim situation, Leaf remained resolute in his determination to survive. He had been in this kind of situation many times before. He steeled himself for the challenge ahead, vowing to overcome whatever tricks Dantalion might employ. Leaf dropped his sword, acknowledging defeat with a sense of frustration. Kneeling on the ground, he offered his surrender. With a grim determination, he requested Dantalion to end his life. Dantalion, sword in hand, acknowledged Leaf's surrender and began to advance towards him, each step resounding through the cavern. Despite outward appearances, Leaf concealed a smile, convinced that Dantalion had fallen into his trap. Mocking Dantalion internally, Leaf dismissed him as a fool, confident that it would be Dantalion who would meet his demise. As Dantalion drew nearer, Leaf discreetly gripped a knife behind his back, preparing for his next move. Unbeknownst to Leaf, Dantalion was also hatching a plan of his own. Utilizing the 4 Libra he had left, he initiated a contract with Hades, summoning a slime to aid him in his scheme. With bated breath, Leaf awaited Dantalion's approach, poised to strike when the moment presented itself. He meticulously calculated the distance, counting each of Dantalion's steps. Just 3 more steps and Leaf would have his opportunity. However, to Leaf's dismay, Dantalion abruptly halted in his tracks. Beads of sweat formed on Leaf's brow as he questioned why Dantalion had stopped. With a knowing gaze, Dantalion revealed that he saw through Leaf's intentions and had anticipated his every move. Unbeknownst to Leaf, Dantalion possessed the skill apostle of Aphrodite, enabling him to discern Leaf's innermost thoughts. He could read that Leaf was holding a knife and was waiting for him to get closer to kill him. With a hearty laugh, Dantalion proclaimed that the game was now truly over, declaring a checkmate against Leaf. Leaf remained steadfast in his resolve, refusing to surrender. His teeth clenched, eyes blazing with anger, and veins pulsating on his face. With an abrupt surge of determination, he lifted his sword and surged forward, proclaiming that victory would be his. Yet, his advance was abruptly halted as he stumbled and fell face first to the ground. Startled, Leaf glanced back to find a slime glued to his feet, obstructing his movement. Shock washed over him as Dantalion closed in. As Leaf attempted another strike with his sword, the golem stealthily approached from behind and seized his arm tightly. Unable to maintain his grip, Leaf's sword slipped from his grasp. He cried out in excruciating pain as the golem crushed his arm. Meanwhile, amidst Leaf's anguished cries, Dantalion reflected on the unfolding events. He found satisfaction in the realization that everything had unfolded according to his plan. Grateful for having sufficient funds to employ a slime, Dantalion marveled at how smoothly his scheme had progressed. With a bloodied sword in hand, Dantalion approached Leaf, taunting him about the crushing defeat delivered by someone he underestimated. Leaf was overcome with fear and horror as Dantalion questioned him about the sensation of being killed in such a manner. Reflecting on his mistakes, Leaf pondered where he went wrong. He considered whether it was his failure to eliminate Demon Lord Dantalion immediately or obtaining the map of the Demon Lord's castle from a certain woman. However, Leaf realized that his misstep occurred at the outset when he challenged the Demon Lord. Understanding his error, Leaf acknowledged that he never should have gone against Dantalion, recognizing him for the true Demon Lord he was. Surrounded by unfamiliar surroundings with white clouds enveloping everything, Dantalion found himself disoriented. He wondered where he was, until the visage of his deceased father appeared before him. His father advised him to brace himself, but Dantalion dismissed him with a scoff, tired of his constant presence. Annoyed, he demanded to know what his father wanted and urged him to depart. Despite his dismissal, his father laughed mockingly and said that no matter what choice he makes from now on, his life will be worse off without his father. Desperate for the noise to cease, Dantalion attempted to dispel the illusion by waving his hand. As his father's laughter persisted, Dantalion suddenly heard his name being called, jolting him awake from the unsettling dream, drenched in sweat. Upon awakening, Dantalion found himself face to face with a girl sporting pink hair, leaning in close to him. Surprised by her proximity, he quickly sat up and inquired about her intentions. The girl offered a swift apology, explaining that he didn't seem to be waking up. Without delay, she produced a piece of paper, getting straight to the point. It detailed the 100 gold pieces of Libra she had loaned him 2 months prior, along with an additional 96 Libra in interest to date, totaling 196 Libra. She expressed her expectation for full repayment that day. Dantalion couldn't help but wonder about the woman's abruptness. Reflecting on the events 3 weeks prior, he remembered the moment of triumph after defeating all the adventurers. Collapsing to the ground, his exhaustion evident, he breathed a sigh of relief, realizing it was finally over. A system message appeared before him, declaring tutorial completed. Demon Lord Dantalian's level is increased. Examining his status window, he noted his level had risen to 4, with an occupation of F-rank monarch. His leadership had increased to B, power remained at F, wisdom stayed at A, politics rose to S, charm increased to C, and his skill remained at F. The message read, as a reward for completing the tutorial, you will be able to learn an S-level skill, level 1. The S-class skills, level max, that were automatically provided in the tutorial will no longer be available. If you wish to use them in the future, you will need to find, learn, and increase the level of the skill yourself. The skill list appeared before him, presenting numerous options. Among them were skills he had utilized during the tutorial, such as Eyes of Zeus and Apostle of Aphrodite. Upon receiving the system message, Dantalian contemplated its implications. Tutorial cleared. He now had to select a skill. With the tutorial now concluded, Dantalian realized that the skills he previously relied on would no longer be accessible to him. Facing the reality that he could only select one skill, and that it would only be at level 1, he understood that this marked the true beginning of his journey. Despite his frustration and the uncertainty of returning to his world, he acknowledged that he had no other option but to press forward. Surveying the list of available skills, he determined that Apostle of Aphrodite was the most suitable choice for him. This skill, which allowed him to discern someone's status and their opinion of him, appeared deceptively simple but held significant practical value. Surveying the aftermath of the battle, Dantalian observed the scattered corpses littering the ground, including Leaf's lifeless form with a sword protruding from his back. A sudden wave of exhaustion washed over him, as if he had been awake for days on end. The golem, carrying him gently in its hand, received his gratitude as Dantalian requested to borrow its body for a while to rest. Drifting into a deep slumber, he awoke later to find himself in bed, his left shoulder and arm wrapped in bandages. Taking in the cracked walls, shattered mirrors, and disarrayed furnishings, he recognized the neglected state of the room. This is Dantalian's room and the golem probably brought him here. Examining his right hand, Dantalian entertained a fleeting hope that it had all been a dream, yet the reality remained unchanged. He was still Dantalian. Approaching the window, he peered outside, only to be momentarily blinded by the sunlight. Shielding his eyes with his hand, he conceded to the clarity of his memories. Accepting his fate that he has to live as a demon lord now, he braced himself for the challenges ahead. However, before he could fully process his thoughts, he was interrupted by the call of his name. Turning, he saw the pink-haired girl. A girl with a gaze as cold as the permafrost ice. She said her name was Lapis Lazuli. Seated on his throne, Dantalian attempted to clarify matters with Lapis Lazuli, who knelt before him. He explained that he was not the one who had borrowed money from her. Despite his efforts, she struggled to comprehend his words. Recalling events from 2 months prior, Lapis Lazuli insisted that it had indeed been Dantalian who had borrowed money from the Chamber of Commerce. Providing evidence, she presented a promissory note as proof of the transaction. Dantalian felt frustration mounting as their discussion seemed to lead nowhere. This cycle of disputes had persisted for an entire week now. Previously, it was dealing with bandits, and now, it was wrangling with debt collectors. It was becoming increasingly evident to him that this world was far from ideal. Examining the promissory note, he noted the exorbitant interest rate of 40% per month. The terms stipulated that interest was due by the 10th of each month, with the original sum to be repaid by the 11th of April. Internally, he vented his frustration, questioning why he had to rectify the mess created by the previous, incompetent Dantalian. He also harbored disdain towards the Chamber of Commerce, deeming them foolish for lending money to someone as reckless as Dantalian. A sudden realization dawned on Dantalian. He sought permission from Lapis Lazuli to pose a series of inquiries, to which she consented. He inquired about the consequences should the debt remain unpaid. In response, she explained the necessity of declaring bankruptcy in such a scenario. Pressing further, Dantalian sought clarification on the aftermath of declaring bankruptcy. Lapis Lazuli elucidated that following the declaration, the Chamber of Commerce would assume ownership of the Demon Lord's castle. Subsequently, they would impose several minor obligations on him, requiring his compliance without question. Dantalian posed one final question, inquiring about the current date. Lapis Lazuli was taken aback by the unexpected query, sensing a foreboding aura emanating from him as he sat on his throne. She admitted her confusion, prompting Dantalian to reiterate his request for the precise date, month, and year. Despite her initial confusion, she offered an apology for any perceived impertinence and provided the date, April 17, 1505. Dantalian realized that 6 days had elapsed beyond the repayment deadline, accruing additional interest that could lead to his bankruptcy. With a knowing smirk, he acknowledged the situation and addressed Lapis Lazuli as Lala. He presented a proposition to her, requesting another loan of 10,000 libra for the demon lord Dantalian. In the imperial calendar year 1505, on the 20th of April, at the Kunkuska firm headquarters, a goblin named Torkel bustled about, issuing orders to his subordinates with urgency evident in his swift steps. Holding a stack of papers, he moved quickly, practically sprinting through the bustling environment. He instructed others to clear his path, emphasizing the busy nature of the situation. Despite his haste, he managed to sign a document and handed it to a messenger, a flying fairy by his side, instructing them to deliver it to His Highness Prince Paimon before 8 o'clock. Inquiring about the status of ship arrangements at Batavia port, Torkel received a reassuring response that everything was progressing smoothly. Glancing at his watch, Torkel's concern deepened as he pondered the unexpected summoning of all executives for an emergency meeting, wondering about the cause of such urgency. Entering the meeting room with force, Torkel swiftly apologized for his delay. Observing the scene, he noticed everyone seated around the table, each with a stack of papers before them. Positioned at the center was an elderly man donning a vampire cloak, distinguished by his white hair and red eyes, adorned with 3 red diamond symbols on his forehead. Meeting Torkel's gaze, the man highlighted his tardiness, emphasizing the importance of time for merchants. For merchants, time is money. Urged to take a seat promptly, Torkel was reminded of the time already wasted as the meeting commenced under the man's command. The Kunkuska firm headquarters, where the 5th-ranked demon lord Malbus, and the 9th-ranked demon lord Paimon, dwell as their guardians. It is the best company in the demon world. The one in charge of the organization is Ivar Lodbrok, one of the 3 ancient vampires of the demon world. Ivar addressed the sudden meeting's purpose, deferring to Lapis Lazuli for elaboration. Acknowledging the directive, Lapis Lazuli positioned herself beside him. Members reacted with surprise and some voiced objections at her presence, perturbed by her hybrid status, a fusion of succubus and human. They questioned why she was in the executive meeting. Perceived as tainted due to her lineage, she faced scrutiny and derogatory remarks. Despite the insults, Lapis Lazuli remained impassive, unaffected by their words. Ivar, with glowing red eyes and a commanding tone, demanded silence, quelling all objections. Under his directive, Lapis Lazuli proceeded with the explanation, compelling everyone, including Torkel, into silence. Lapis Lazuli proceeded with her explanation, revealing that the 71st-ranked demon lord, Dantalian, had requested another loan. Torkel found it difficult to believe that they had convened for such a reason. Rising from his seat, he placed both hands on the table, demanding clarification on the matter. Ivar intervened, urging Torkel to compose himself, then instructed Lapis Lazuli to disclose the amount requested by Dantalian. With compliance, she revealed that Dantalian had asked for 10,000 libra. The revelation left the other members stunned, their mouths agape in disbelief. Torkel, too, was taken aback, contemplating the enormity of the sum. 10,000 libra could equate to the national budget of a small country. Torkel expressed disbelief at the staggering amount, questioning if Dantalian truly made such a request. Lapis Lazuli affirmed that he had indeed done so. She recollected the encounter at Dantalian's castle a few days ago, where she had sought clarification on his loan proposal. Doubting her ears, she had asked Dantalian to repeat himself. In response, Dantalian, with a smirk, confirmed his desire to borrow an additional 10,000 libra. Lapis Lazuli inquired about his intentions, pointing out his existing debt of 196 libra. He explained that this was precisely why he sought additional funds. Perplexed, she admitted her difficulty in comprehending his reasoning. He initiated an open and frank discussion with Lala, questioning her decision to lend him money despite his reputation as an incompetent demon lord. He questioned whether his suspicion of ulterior motives was accurate. Lala, maintaining her stoic demeanor, adamantly refuted the notion. Dantalian, with a chuckle, rose from his throne, suggesting that she never expected him to repay the loan, but rather aimed to force him into bankruptcy and manipulate him into serving the firm's interests. Stepping closer, he insinuated that these were her true intentions. He leaned in, questioning the accuracy of his assessment. Despite his probing, Lala remained resolute in her denial. Dantalian then inquired whether she had been directed by the company to extend the loan and establish a connection with him. Lala, still devoid of emotion, denied any such directive, affirming that her actions were of her own volition. Dantalian, amused by her unwavering denials, remarked on her ability to maintain such falsehoods without hesitation. Returning to the core issue, Dantalian knelt down to bring himself to eye level with Lala. He explained that if he couldn't repay the loan, he'd be obligated to serve as the firm's lackey indefinitely, all for the sum of 10,000 libra. Presenting the deal to Lala, he suggested it wasn't such a bad arrangement. Dantalian proposed that it could potentially benefit her greatly, leading to a promotion if she successfully enlisted a demon lord to serve the company. Taking hold of her chin, he lifted it to meet his gaze, questioning whether she'd be willing to go along with the plan. Lala, grasping his hand on her chin, acknowledged her understanding of the situation. Returning to the present in the executive meeting room, Torkel raised objections, questioning the rationale behind requesting 10,000 libra when Dantalian couldn't even repay 100 libra. Ivar acknowledged Torkel's valid point and instructed Lapis Lazuli to provide further details. She complied and started explaining the details. Recalling Dantalian's prepared response for such inquiries, she began recounting Dantalian's narrative to the executives. Dantalian has lost his mind. He claimed that a plague would afflict the world and declared his intention to find a cure, mentioning it was for the sake of a loved one. Torkel interrupted, seeking clarification on the reference to a loved one. Lapis Lazuli affirmed that Dantalian was indeed referring to her, as she identified herself as his mistress. The executives reacted with shock and disdain, deeming it unthinkable for a demon lord to be involved with her. Undeterred, she revealed that she initiated the connection with Dantalian, driven by her ambition to become his mistress. Outrage ensued among the executives, with some even suggesting her removal from the room. However, Lapis Lazuli disclosed that her actions were part of her calculated scheme to manipulate Dantalian into serving their company. Her revelation elicited laughter from Ivar, commended her strategy and described it as magnificent. Then, he invited the others to share their thoughts. He marveled at how this succubus-human hybrid had orchestrated Dantalian's integration into the largest trading company in the demon world. He admired her defiance against being labeled as inferior and noted her sacrifice, even offering her chastity, to achieve her goals, and now she had become a demon lord's mistress. Ivar's laughter reverberated throughout the room as he hailed the situation as a masterpiece, showcasing Lapis Lazuli's ingenuity. Ivar emphasized that Kunkuska operates as a meritocracy. Typically, he wouldn't entertain the idea of lending money to an incompetent demon lord like Dantalian. However, he declared that this situation warranted a special loan. Amidst his continuous laughter, Lapis Lazuli watched him closely, her expression unchanged. Finally, Ivar instructed her to deliver a message to Dantalian. "I'll provide you with the 10,000 libra you desire." He continued to chuckle intermittently as he spoke. In the city of merchants, Curious, on May 3 of the imperial calendar year 1505, Lala proposed a deal to the merchants. She tasked them with gathering a specific herb found throughout the continent. The merchants were taken aback by her request, questioning if she truly intended to collect that particular herb. They had to collect every single one of it. They expressed disbelief at the idea of spending 8,000 libra to hire thousands of individuals solely for this purpose. Curious about her motive for acquiring what they deemed as a mere weed, they pressed her for an explanation. However, Lala insisted that the reasons behind the request were not their concern, stating that they were simply following orders from His Highness, the Demon Lord Dantalian. Urging them to proceed promptly, she left no room for further debate. As Lala passed by, she couldn't help but notice the sneers and smirks on people's faces. Some remarked openly about a woman spending such a large sum of money on the whims of a foolish demon lord. Others speculated that Dantalion must have finally lost his mind. The atmosphere was filled with disdain and mockery. Rumors about Lala being Dantalion's mistress only fueled the mockery further. Amidst the laughter and ridicule, it was clear that many believed Dantalion's fate was sealed. On June 20, imperial calendar year 1505, Lala returned to Dantalion's castle. Approaching Dantalion, she found him engrossed in a book while seated on a chair. Standing nearby, she informed him that she had fulfilled his request by securing the herbs he had asked for. She assured him that storage facilities had been arranged and were under tight guard. Dantalion closed the book and expressed his appreciation, acknowledging her efforts with a simple, "Good job." After reporting the successful acquisition of the herbs, Lala inquired about Dantalion's plans. Recalling his enigmatic smile when he requested the 10,000 libra loan, she sensed he had a strategy in mind, though she remained uncertain. Reminding him of his warning about an impending epidemic, she mentioned having expended 80% of the funds on purchasing what she deemed as worthless herbs. Dantalion responded with a chuckle, prompting her to make a guess about his intentions. Admitting her lack of insight, she confessed to being completely clueless. Dantalion chuckled again, acknowledging her uncertainty. With a glass in his hand, he expressed his congratulations to Lala for her successful work. Inviting her to join him in a toast, he raised his glass expectantly. Despite her inclination to decline, he swiftly interjected, questioning her reluctance to participate in something he specifically arranged for her. Recognizing his resolute gaze, she promptly apologized and accepted the gesture. Approaching him, she accepted the glass from Dantalion. Chuckling lightly, he reassured her that he was merely teasing, urging her not to appear so concerned. He commended Lala for her excellent work and toasted to her future endeavors. Though her expression remained unchanged, she complied and consumed the contents of the glass. Upon tasting it, her expression shifted. Wiping her mouth, she inquired about the drink's composition. Dantalion, amused, rested his right hand on the armrest and partially covered his face with it. He explained that it was concocted from the herbs she had gathered. With a mischievous tone, he asked for her opinion on its taste. Lala questioned if he was joking, to which Dantalion responded with a chuckle, insisting he was serious. He remarked that to secure the 10,000 libra, she must have informed the firm that he had become deranged and sought to concoct a cure for a fictional plague. With a smirk, he questioned if it all didn't make perfect sense. Lala offered no response, simply staring at him with an expressionless demeanor. He chuckled and shrugged before inquiring about the current date. Lala informed him that it was the 20th of June, 1505, according to the imperial calendar, and questioned his reason for asking. He replied that it was about time, reaching for a quill to jot something down on a piece of paper. Then, turning to Lala, he explained that starting the next day, she wouldn't need to come to the castle for a while. Handing her the paper, he instructed her to go to the location written on it and observe for a while. Confused, Lala examined the paper and questioned the purpose of this task. Dantalion chuckled and encouraged her to go, assuring her that she would understand. He suggested that she relax and explore some places since he knew she had a lot on her plate. On June 24, in the imperial calendar year 1505, in the kingdom of Sardinia, at a traveler's bathhouse named Syracuse, Lala undressed and wrapped herself in a bath towel, securing her hair. She couldn't fathom what that man was thinking, sending her to such a place. Stepping out of the changing room, she joined other women clad in towels, all soaking in the water. Curiosity piqued, she submerged herself up to her chest, reflecting on the contents of the note he had given her. Kingdom of Sardinia, Syracuse, public bathhouse, joint pain, fever, black bruises. While she briefly entertained the notion that he had predicted a plague, she quickly dismissed it as implausible. Submerging herself further until only her nose remained above the water, Lala pondered the notion that Dantalion didn't possess such power. Yet, an unsettling feeling lingered. Abruptly, a scream pierced the air. Reacting swiftly, she rose and approached the source, finding a girl pointing to a collapsed child. The child, panting heavily, expressed pain when questioned by Lala about their well-being. Continuing her inquiry, Lala pressed the child to specify where the pain was. The child responded that her entire body ached. Placing her hand on the child's forehead, Lala confirmed a high fever. Assuring the child that she would take her to the clinic immediately, Lala was taken aback when she noticed black bruises forming on the child's neck. The sight stunned her, recalling the note from Dantalion which mentioned black bruises. Following the screams of multiple people collapsing, Lala found herself in a state of shock and confusion, uncertain of the situation's gravity. At the clinic, numerous bodies from the bathhouse arrived, each adorned with black bruises and covered faces, signifying their demise. The doctor, bewildered by the unfolding events, advised the remaining survivors to retire to bed immediately for rest. With 30 patients already, the doctor struggled to comprehend the situation and its cause. Seated on a bench, Lala wore a grim expression, grappling with shock and disbelief. The notion that Dantalion had accurately foreseen everything seemed unfathomable to her. Her contemplation was interrupted by the doctor, who inquired about her well-being. All the people from the bathhouse died except for her. He urged her to hurry up and go and that it would be better for her to leave the town. Lost in contemplation, Lala gazed at her hands, her thoughts drifting back to the day when Dantalion had offered her the liquid made from the herbs she had collected. She recalled her skepticism about the contents of the glass and her subsequent realization that she remained unaffected after drinking it. Though she found it hard to believe, she couldn't deny the connection between her immunity and the liquid. Reluctantly, she acknowledged the truth of the situation. Meanwhile, in his chamber, Dantalion stood by the window, holding a cup of wine, a smile playing on his lips as he contemplated the unfolding events. He said, "A plague is upon us.